we're not live, but we possibly could be. Oh, I can't trust you, Heather. Well, the ironic part about it is we have a lot of fears. You know, the spiders and the snakes and the fear of heights. But the one we share the most, and it's documented, is the fear of public speaking. Now, number one. And so I kind of experienced that a little bit myself, too. But it's what kind of holds me in awe of Pastor T and Pastor Dave to do this on a level every week and bring the heat. I mean, bring the heat the way Tanya, so many things that she's spoken into my life. But when was God real? That proves that God was real. All right? And so during my week, every time God manifests himself, I go back there. Don't tell me God's not real. You know, he's real. And then, I take the sin of Ham, and I start a conversation with a 20 or 30-year pastor in another town, and I know I'm out of my league, but I'm diving in. And he says, I never thought of it like that. And I thought, now I don't feel as shallow, not knowing what the vineyard was. Yeah, and we look, and this is what we get to sit under every week. So if they come to you and they ask you, you want to stand up for 16 minutes? Bring me my phone so I can stay on schedule. Where is it? Yeah, here it is. I love it. He sits it here and watches it. Yeah. Then it takes courage to say yes. And then he asks you, do you want to talk about the people's checkbooks? Whoa, not really. That takes another level of courage. Well, will you get up there and talk about your own checkbook? I said, yeah, but culturally, we've made that uncomfortable. All right? You read the Bible, and, man, they're quick to tell you how many goats you have, how many sheep you have, to introduce these people. I mean, it wasn't taboo in the Old Testament. It wasn't. But now if I told you how much I made, then you would compare it to how much you made, and then compare it to how much he made, and then that whole mammon teaching would start to color up. Absolutely. So, man, you got to stay on your notes, or you get to your next note and you've already been there. But thank you, Dave and T. It's amazing. Let's give them a hand. This is their fruit. This is their fruit right here. So I guess I'll start over again with, I'm a talk radio kind of guy. Jared would throw me a what's up if he was in the building, because every time he gets in my truck, he's like, how do you do it? How do you do it? Well, I like information. And music, I like music, but sometimes music confuses me. And it's hard to focus and do everything you need to do. So I love information. And so my opinion a lot of times is plagiarized from somebody else's opinion. But that happens in the training under the Word, too. It does. And if your opinion changes for the good, then your life changes for the good. Absolutely. So I know Dave Ramsey will probably sue me after this, because I haven't done any Dave Ramsey training. I haven't done any financial university. We're open to it, and I even told Dave when he approached this, I said, well, let's spend $100 and let's get the training, and then we'll turn on the tape and we'll go line item by line item with a plan that we know works. And he encouraged me, well, let's take the first step and let's hear how it worked for you before the training or without the training. And maybe that's something more personal, because how it worked for me, check my notes. Yeah, how it worked for me was I was in control of my own money. I was in control of my own future. I was in control. When I was a kid, this is what I wanted, okay? Well, I had adult authority over me, and they would say, nope, you can't have that. And so I'd say, okay, well, one day I will. And I watched that. And I was a young kid, and I come home with a car. I was 2 years from driving. even learning. That car was sitting right there. My mom's like, all right, where'd you get the car? Got quite a deal on it, Mom. Don't worry, didn't cost you a dime. And it'll be sitting there when it's time for me to drive. Yeah, and it was lawn mowing money and snow removal money. But I had overstepped my bounds to my authority in my own home. And my mom put her foot down. Or she might have put my dad's foot down. But the car left. Okay, the car left. And man, I was mad. And so I got on the phone. I called my grandpa. And I said, can you believe that? My grandpa drove out of Montana, brought the car back, and said, that's Rick's car. Rick's just going to pay me for the car. All right, because we were normal. We were normal. It was important that we started developing the credit rating of the kids at an early age, so that when the kids started to get through high school and looked to college, that the burden of the financial provision was more on the credit rating of the kid than it was on the preparation of the adults. This is a tough subject because you put 10 people in a room and you're going to be 50-50, that it is the kid's responsibility. And if you're in that 50%, I will agree with you, but it's the kid's responsibility to work and, radio term, cash flow it. You don't want the kid coming out of college owing, being in debt. The other 50%, they're going to, they're going to borrow it. Then the kid's going to have all the time to study. That's a whole nother night of training in itself, okay? But which 50% are we? I want to be the 50% that's prepared. The kids are prepared, okay? And I am going to go ahead and start to get back to my notes, okay? So, well, I get too many fragmented stories going on, and we really want to go a direction that says, are you poor or are you broke? What is the difference between poor and what's the difference between broke? Can you be poor in America? Absolutely. Can you be poor because you can't afford the car you want? I don't believe so. I think poor is a condition of maybe your government, a corrupt government holding you down. Even in America, poor can be a neighborhood that is so stricken with poverty that there's no way out economically. And you find that threshold of economics where, let's say, you're making X amount of money, but if you make X plus 10, then you're not afforded the programs that are available to you when you're at X. And so you got to jump above X a lot higher than 10, or you can't afford to break out. That's my opinion of what poor is. Broke is, I can't get the car I want because the bank won't give it to me. So here we are back to that little kid. I want it, but Dad says I can't have it. Well, now I'm an adult. I got a credit rating. All I need to do is prove to the bank that my income debt ratio allows that acquisition and I can have it. Now we've established normal. Where did my tea go? Bring it up to me, sweetheart. Get your face on YouTube. She's beautiful. All right, well, we've established what normal is, and everybody wants to be normal. Everybody on the globe wants to be American normal. So what is American normal? We live it every day. We really do. And normal is provide for your needs and your wants. That's what normal is. Provide for your needs and wants. And you notice we're kind of changing up the service a little bit tonight, because when you go from normal to different, change has to take place. We changed tonight. We're going word first and then music. Did it hurt? We'll find out in the end. Does it feel different? It does. It does. I leaned on Dave. I said, man, I've prepared for my financial future. I prepared for my family's future. I've prepared for the future on my real estate, on my vehicles, but I'm having a hard time preparing for the health of my body in the future. And he says, then you have to exercise change. You have to exercise change. And change is easy for a day. And change is easy for 2 days. And then that week sets in. And man, we saw change. We saw 40 pounds fall off in a year. Wow. And then I celebrated by bringing the 40 pounds back, and they brought some friends. Okay? That's the change that has to become a lifestyle. Same with finances. It has to become a lifestyle. It really does. So the poor, man, we need to pray them out. We need to help them out, And before we lost Brian Scott, God rest his soul, I love the man. I asked him, I said, now when we do this lottery, okay, this pull tab, I said, who supports the lottery? He said, well, Rick, I got to tell you, about 80% of it comes from poverty level people. And then statistically it proved that poverty level people spend $400 a year trying to break out, is what they're trying to do. They're trying to break out of poverty. The ironic part about it is if you took the $400 a year and you broke it to a monthly investment, $35, $40, and you put that $35, $40 into a low yield annuity, 8 to 10%, 20 years, you'd have $400,000. Okay, so that's an aha moment, if you can do that math. So what does the lottery support? Well, it supports a lot of income for people that are in the business model, and for the feel good, it provides scholarships for middle income families. So isn't that ironic? We got our poverty level occupants sending our middle class kids to college. Now, something has to change. Something has to change. We have to be more future-minded. We have to be more purposefully driven. We have to be more decided to keep our formula correct. You've got to burn more calories than you take in. And you've got to do it consistently. And so I'm struggling on my levels. I don't know what levels everybody else is struggling on, but you can guarantee that if you don't spend time in prayer and communicating with Holy Spirit, the levels you struggle on can start to stack up. And then you start to struggle on several levels and many levels and too many levels, and then before you know it, it just gets dark. And you don't want it to get dark. So I don't enjoy the fact that I struggle calorically, but I do enjoy the fact that it's my number one issue. It really is, okay? And I know there's breakthrough for me, and I enjoy that, and it's exciting. So let's go ahead and get to the notes, shall we? Shall we? And like I said, I am a radio listener, and so a lot of my experience comes from personal mistakes, all right? I want a business. Bank says you can't have a business. I said, well, I think I can have a business. And they said, no, we're not loaning money on that kind of business because they are going down like ships in the sea. And so I had some real estate that wasn't my miraculous investment. It was Holy Spirit working for me even when I was in a rebellious state of my life. You know, if this was the day I was born and this is the day I was going to die, then I can see stages of my life where Holy Spirit just absolutely took over, because I knew from a very young point in my life that there was a God. And I watched my parents show that to me. And I wanted that God in my life, but I still wanted to make my own decisions. So when it was time for me to start being accountable, I can see where Holy Spirit did direct me. I come to Casper. The housing market had crashed because they had moved the refinery. They had closed the Casper refinery, and it really had crashed the job market. And so I started buying houses. Everybody I knew said, "Don't buy houses. The market has crashed." And by buying houses, it's not an empire. I'm talking 3 or 4 houses. And the market had crashed. And the people that I held in high esteem and were mentors over me at the time, they were even encouraging me. And the math was simple. House payments were $100, rent was $650. Sorry, going to $100. Sister come to town, needed a house. Grandma come to town, couldn't get a loan, got her a house. Brother came to town, that kind of deal. And so at the time, I didn't realize what an amazing story it was going to make up in 20 years. But now it was time to buy my business. And I was going to buy the business. The bank said, "No, you're not going to buy the business." I hadn't saved. I hadn't prepared. The formula where preparation and patience meets opportunity, that's where success is formulated, And so I was going to do it. And I leveraged it myself, put the money up against the homes, and I bought my business. And I remember the day climbing up Outer Drive, and this was 15, 20 years later. I said, "God, I got myself into this. Now, please help me devise an exit strategy." Exit and failure are not the same thing. They're not the same thing, but we're taught how to get into. Even churches were taught how to get into churches, but are we taught how to get out? We were taught here that when you leave this church, you can leave 2 ways. You can leave where it's a good thing, or you can leave where it's not. And finding that good thing, that's Holy Spirit minded. It's Holy Spirit driven. It really is, man. There's people out there right now that I still love you to death, and they're very sad they had to leave, but they had to. They had to. All right, so here I am in business, climbing that hill, and the day came. And Holy Spirit pointed. He says, "All right, this is your chance." And I said, "All right, well, whatever you require of me on this day, I will do." And the bank said, "Well, you got to walk away from $500,000 investment." And the landowner said, "He ain't ever going to do that. We got him right where we need him. He don't want to tell his friends that he ain't the owner no more. He don't want to tell his friends that he don't own that business no more. He don't want to tell his friends that he didn't sell that business for $1 million, that mammon." But I promised Holy Spirit that day. And this was before it happened. I promised him. I said, "All right." Back the truck up, and we had a big old semi, and we loaded up all the gear. And the owner of the land drove his car and blocked this semi and said, "You are not leaving." I said, "I am. The only control you have over me is the control God gives you. That's the only control you have." And so I walked away. And to this day, I wouldn't go back. I think that's how I qualify. Was this move a good move? By thinking, would you go back to your last move? And so without getting too deep into that, I thought, "Lord, why would you test me in this manner?" Because I think I still had that justification need. Why would I leave that investment? And then years later, not many years, but a couple years later, this beautiful gal arrived early, in need of medical transport to Denver, in need of a long stay in a NIC unit in Denver, and that ran up quite a tab. And then my insurance company found out that I had her in level 3 neonatal care, and all of the care that she received could have been provided in a local care facility. All right, well, they didn't give me the choice, and if you're watching tonight, I wasn't given the choice whether this child, you don't come to a truck builder and say, hey, do you want your kid in level 3, level 2, or level 1 NIC care? You want your kid to come out of it. You want your kid to come out of it. So here looms another $300,000, $400,000 battle. And at this point, I was no stranger to the inside of a courtroom. So I said, I'm going to hand over the control you have to me. I'm going to hand that over to my Creator. And I'll meet you in that courtroom. And there the muscles were stretched again. Okay? And then, of course, many of you know about Darby. Because her accident didn't happen in my home, my insurance kicked back again. And they were wonderful friends of mine. And so I wasn't on the lurch to sue, but I had another insurance battle. And as I look back now, I see that God trained me to be strong enough to take a little stone out of a creek, swing it around, and say, yeah, you got a beautiful law team from Colorado. My own lawyer is saying, Rick, you better settle quick, because if this thing gets to a jury, you're not only going to lose your investment, you're going to lose your home. You're going to lose your retirement. You're going to lose everything if you don't settle this before this court date starts. I said, no. I've never had a bad day with a guy in a robe. I've had a bad day with a guy in the robe. Don't get me wrong. But I deserved it when I had that bad day. I deserved it. He saw through the smoke and mirrors. He saw through the flesh's attempt at justification. He saw through the manipulation of what is the truth and what is not the truth. And he got straight to it. So I want to go in. And God was with me every single time. I shared a lot of it with Kellen. I was hoping he'd be here tonight, but it's an amazing story for another night. The story tonight is, how do we change? How do we change? It's a short list. It really is. Let me read you the top of it. And this is where sometimes with the radio personalities and the TV personalities, the financial personalities, they don't agree. But I got Support Your Church, top of the list. The financial formula for health says direct all financial income towards debt until you can afford to give. So we'll just agree to disagree on that small thing, and I'll leave it on the top of my list, okay? Absolutely. And then right below that is learn to save. Learn to save. And learn to save beyond that $100 and think, ooh, now I got $100. Learn to save beyond that $1,000, which is the radio personality's emergency fund, okay? And then learn to save beyond 6 months of expense, which, man, for some people can be 25, 30 grand. You put that much money in an account, and suddenly that car starts to look a little more tangible, okay? It does. And Holy Spirit working with me again, because as a young kid, my grandpa said, if you can't save half of your money, you're overspending. I mean, I was young. Half. And then my dad's best friend, Al, God rest his soul, I know he's in heaven waiting, he said, if you can't save 50 or $100 out of every paycheck, you're overspending. So I had two of these old school guys, and they were both saying the same thing, because actually half of my paycheck at that age was about $50. And so that's what I did. That's what I did. You know, low yield, back 8% back in the day. Now it's 12 to 18%. And it grew. And it grew to the point where I wanted to get a hold of it. I said, wow, shoot, look at that. There's $2,500 in there. I'm 6th grade. I need that $2,500. But I had it locked up into an account that would penalize you for taking it out. And so that's what trained me to save. Here's the 25, but leave 1,700 of it on that desk for early withdrawal. I mean, it's a heavy penalty. And now you get to retirement age and retirement programs. You get to decide whether you're going to pay for it and fund it yourself, which is on the list. Let's see. Fund all purchases personally. That's number 11. I'm sorry, but I think that needs to be in the top 5. I do. Because I was a person that would rather finance a car loan than take it out of savings. Because I liked to see that mammon in that account. I earned that mammon in that account. And it felt like that mammon put me on a list. Made me safe. Okay, and I was sharing with Gary even tonight that in my statistics class in college, we had a room about twice as many people as this, and the instructor said, I'll make a bet with you. I'll bet there's 2 people in this room that have the same exact birthday. And I was like, that's impossible. You know how many days there are in a year? Bam, he won. Okay, so I told Gary tonight, I said, I'll bet you there's at least 2 millionaires in this building tonight. At least 2. Because millionaires, they don't look like what millionaires used to look like when incomes were $17,000, $18,000 a year. They don't look like that anymore. A millionaire now is accumulated assets, is accumulated retirement, is income, cars, they're everywhere. And that's what I love about the radio is it proves that you can be a Susan Orman success story. Susan Orman's a major financial advisor in the TV world. And they asked her, who's your hero, Susan? And she says, I'll tell you who my hero is. It's the head of household that makes $40,000 a year, that supports 2 kids, goes to work, buys food, provides a vehicle, and stays out of debt. You know what they told her on national TV? They don't exist. It's not true. That's who her hero was. And so I wanted to be her hero. And I saw that interview early in my life. Holy Spirit direction. It really is. If you open your ears, you'll hear. All right? So how do we make change? We stopped music. Everybody sat down. And we started talking. Somebody had to initiate that change. Somebody had to approve that change. And then all of us had to follow through with it. Yeah, we did. Doesn't feel crazy, but it's change. So maybe tonight, maybe God's kind of whispering, is there change that needs to happen? Is there something that you can do, I can do differently for a better financial, healthy future? Well, another thing on the list, prioritize spending. Everybody calls it a budget. It's impossible. You can't do a budget. I know. I don't particularly care for the budget either because our lives change daily. But if you can change the word budget, I'm not trying to change the word budget, but if you can change the word budget to priority spending, you figure out what's a priority, and you put that on your list. If your priority is a $600 car payment, that's normal. If your priority is a $2,000 house payment, that's normal. Now, the bank is going to assess that and say that based on your income, this payment's not allowed, okay? And if you're making those payments because you don't want to pull money out of your own portfolio, we'll call it savings or investments, then that's normal. But there's a difference between the way normal people think and the way wealthy people think. Okay? There's a difference. And our pastors opened that up to us. that it's okay to be wealthy. It's okay to think like the wealthy, because I guarantee you, if we flushed out the millionaires and one of them had 3 million, he would be wondering if he had more millions than the other millionaire. And it never ends. It never ends until that day into my business walked the most millionaire I'd ever heard of, and he sat down on my counter and poured himself a free cup of coffee. And I love the guy. I miss him. Because I had watched his kids grow up. I had made sure that every tire I bought for his kids' cars was the cheapest tire I could find. And I walked up to him and I said, now that you're a gazillionaire, how is life? And everybody in the office is like, whoa, there goes Rick again, man. He just doesn't know when to shut up. I said, come on, open the checkbook. Let's take a look. And he said, Rick, I got to tell you, it's more work right now trying to figure out how to spend this money than it was when I had your money. It's more work now. Because if you don't spend it right, then it gets spent for you in a direction that you don't agree with. So you really have to manage, know, and spend. And that stuck with me. It really did. If you think, the money is the key to happiness and success, we all know that that's not. But to hear even a Jim Carrey, put him on a bus and ship him overseas for all I care. But he said, I wish everybody had the chance to have all the money in the world once. Hair hanging, greasy, not happy. Man, find that internal joy, not the external joy. I get to go to the movies. Oh, that was a good movie. That was fun. And then the movie's over, and your joy's gone. Find the internal joy that says, oh, man, I get to go home, and it's going to be dark, and I get to start it all over again. Man, I can't wait for tomorrow. Find that internal joy. That's where you'll find happiness. And you find that, and you find this loop you're in. It's not a hamster wheel where you just go pay the bills, and tomorrow you go pay the bills, and tomorrow you go pay the bills. You get to live on this heaven until the next heaven arrives, if you can find that joy. Anybody want to see anything else on the list? Let's see. Let's examine debt. Okay, let's get back to the radio personality that says, how do we change? One debt at a time. And so this is the nuts and bolts of it, and this is actually laid out in a plan. You arrange your debt, and your instinct is going to want to be to knock out the biggest debt because that feels like the biggest victory. But there's a chemical that releases in your body when you knock out a debt. And so if you take the smallest one and you knock it out, you get to feel that experience. And then you knock out the next one, and you get to feel it again. You knock out the next one, and before you know it, you're creating an addiction to knock out debt. Yeah, you are. And then you can start building wealth and start thinking like the wealthy think. And the wealthy today, they're not condemned to the eye of the needle to get through heaven, people. They're not condemned to that eye of the needle. They get to give because much is required of them. And then you get to feel when you do give, you get to feel the return, and you give, and it becomes a race to outgive God, and before you know it, it's a race you really want to be in. And it's hard to explain. It really is, but it's an amazing journey. There's another element where you set goals. And you don't set goals, well, in 6 years, I'd really like to have that Cadillac paid for. No. You set goals that says, hey, we're not eating out until that debt is gone. Okay? And so we're finding different levels, and people are going to be at all kinds of different levels. They're going to be at level 1 where they're just shaking their hands in the air. They're going to be at level 5 where, do I pay off my home, or do I get a couple new cars before I pay off my home? And, the cars are going to be 30%. The home is only at 7.5%, there's different levels, and that's where you have to set your goals, you have to set your list, and really stay to it. Just like a diet program, okay? You can get there. You can be 3/4 of the way through your debt list and think, this is about the best shape I've ever been in. And so I'm driving that home. And I keep returning to the car because it really is, the most common loan that we go to get outside of our homes, and we're allowed a little debt in the home world because nobody can, go throw down $200,000 for a house or 150, whatever it is. So, we treat debt like a little bit acceptable. But if you're protecting savings if you're protecting your savings with debt, then it's something that you need to pray about, something you need to talk to your spouse about, something you need to do research about, find out if that really fits the model. Okay, all right. Man, I'm dry. Because once you get past, okay, 707, let's land this plane. No, we'll land it. Okay, well, once you get through your debt list, okay, and let's definitely take the house off the list and the rent off the list, because we've got kids, we've got future events that are going to happen. Now we need to kind of start planning for those. But there's one step between those I like to hit on, and that is making sure that you're spending your money wisely. And that means if you can take, let's say, $5,000 out of your yearly income, put it into an IRA, the government will give you back $1,200 of your taxed income for that year. Okay? And this is according to middle class wage. So now you get to keep the $5,000, and these are not exact numbers. This is just how the formula is set up. You get to keep the $5,000, and the $5,000 grows, and you get the $1,200 tax benefit from the government that then you can put into a growing fund, and that just turned into 65 in a couple months, 3-4 months. And that's how the IRAs work. They say, you put so much, and then you're a billionaire in 50 years. Well, that's how it works. And it locks it down to where if you say, I want that $5,000 and that $1,200 back out of there, then you got to lay a big stack of it on the table before you leave. And it's that consistency, that yearly consistency. That's what I call taking advantage of what's allowed to you by our government. We set that up. And then you're allowed Roth investments. You're allowed child education investments. You're allowed an extended program for investing once you get through your level 1 debt and you start to be able to utilize your own money instead of utilizing your money to pay the guy that you borrowed the money from. And you get to 11, fund all your own purchases personally. You fund them personally. Well, Rick, all I want's a $4,000 truck. I'm not looking for a $34,000 truck. Well, let's say if the $4,000 truck, if they financed it for 4 years and your payment was $350, then if you took the $350 and put it into a savings account, even a .02 savings account, consistently, you would buy that truck in half the time than giving it to the bank. Half the time. But you couldn't have the truck until the money was in the bank. You couldn't have the truck. It's when can I have it? When can I have it? When are you going to hand me those keys? When are you going to hand me those keys? Well, you'll get the keys the second you open up your checkbook and let them have it. So that's mammon. It is. When? When can I have it? It's going to prove, it's going to make me happy. It's going to prove that I've earned it. It's going to prove my stature in the community. It's not. It's not. Because you're probably driving a truck right now. You're probably driving something right now. So learn to save, and then learn to be able to see the savings and not dream about the savings. And then, like I said, the aha moment is when the savings account really gets substantial. And then when you're sitting there, let's use a $25,000 figure, and you see a $25,000 vehicle. Now, that's where the rubber hits the road, okay? Do I want that $25,000 vehicle bad enough to empty that account? Do you know how long it took me to put that account together? Do you know how hard I worked to put that money in that account? Do you know how many shifts I put in? Do I want that bad enough to empty it today? And guess what that does? That makes the $5,000 truck look a lot better. Doesn't it? And then you take the 5 out of the 25, you pay for the truck, you're driving the truck, you're not making payments on the truck, and you're putting the money back with the 20, and it's 25 again quicker than you can imagine. It really does prioritize your spending when you're financing it. Now, when you're financing it with the bank's money, it doesn't look like 25. Does it, Chris? It doesn't look like 25. It looks like $400 a month. That's all it's going to take to get me those keys is that $400. Yeah, you're right, because that's normal. But that's not the way wealthy people think. They think, well, in that $400, how much of that money is the bank's? All of it. All of it. For about more than half the note. You're just paying the bank. And then you can start paying on the principal. Man, drive down, put it on YouTube. Drive down Denver and look at the Wells Fargo skyscrapers. Yeah, they're not there by accident. They're not there by accident. And this is another mistake I made. I said, well, I'm going to get a credit card that pays the 3% for purchases, and I'm going to put it to the man. And I did. I did. I put it to the man. I'd get those spending credits back, $60, $70. But it was a little bit like letting the enemy into a camp. It really was. And I was good about paying it off monthly because you weren't getting that interest on me. But it was a little bit like having the enemy in your pocket. And I'm not saying that credit cards are the enemy, but I'm saying that if you dance with somebody that's wet, you're probably going to get wet. Okay? So if you don't want to get wet, don't dance with anybody that's been in the pool. And if you don't want to end up owing money on a credit card, maybe it's best that you don't carry a credit card. And if you have to have a credit card, maybe it's attached to your checking account, and now that purchase is coming out of your checkbook, and you think about it a little bit. We've got to start thinking about the way we spend our money. I put myself to a test. Okay, 4 seconds. I put myself to a test. This is right after I got married, because when I got married, her debt was my debt. My debt was her debt. My portfolio was her portfolio. Her portfolio was mine. And so I wanted to test her out. Man, I love that woman. I love you, honey. So we each took a $20 bill. I said, how long can you make it last? How long can you make a $20 bill last? And then we were very young. So that represents being on the other side of it. Money is for spending, investing, and enjoying. Okay? You have to enjoy your money. You can't be afraid of spending your money. So she kind of brought me back from the dark side there. They said, why would you go stand in front of 25 people with a dry mouth when all it took was 89 cents to buy a tea so you could take a drink, right, Rayden? Okay, so I know I'm getting a little further from normal, but there is a happy medium. It's in the bottom of the notes here. do I ever get to spend money? Do I ever get to spend it? It kind of depends on your situation. You know, the radio personality calls it beans and rice. You know, if you're going out and spending $70 on meals and you're crying because you owe money on your vehicle, then there's not a lot of help for you, because you're directing the funds into the wrong area. You need to direct those funds at the enemy. You need to attack that debt. You need to be, what's he say, sick and tired of being, yeah, exactly. Gazelle intensity, sick and tired of being sick and tired. And, you know, when I'm sick and tired of being tired of when I climb a set of steps or when I have to go kick an elk out of the brush, I'm going to get serious calorically. I am. And Holy Spirit is going to help me with that because I pray about it. And I know it can happen. And I am beautifully and wonderfully created. And I am here for a purpose. And I'm public speaking. I'm putting it on my resume, man. I'm publicly speaking. So if Face Down wants to come up and get their instruments hooked up, thank you for being a part of change. Thank you for even this service, for turning it upside down. I've got a little bit that we can share about business acquisition and business exit and business this and business that. You know, how do you qualify your business for the future? That's another night. But it's a level of wisdom that I had to earn, that I really did have to earn. But for tonight, if you can leave knowing that there is a long-term chance for change if you can direct your funds to the highest priority need. And the highest priority need is usually the smallest debt. It's always the smallest debt. And enjoy that, overcoming that smallest debt, and move on to the next one. And then once all that's gone, except for the house, then give like nobody else. Give like nobody else. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for listening. And I'm available for questions. It's amazing up here, man. Let's do it again in a year.